Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Zoom. And as I've told you over the last several weeks, we are doing a Newsline by Zoom purely because the positive figures for COVID-19 have been on the way up, and sadly the death toll too has been rather unacceptably high. And so Newsfirst is doing what it can to try and stem the spread of this dreaded disease. All that notwithstanding, tonight we've got here a person from the Transparency International Sri Lanka to talk about transparency. What else, honestly? And it's Nadishani Pereira who's joining us this evening. Very good evening to you, madam.
Very good evening, Faraz. Thank you for having me today.
It's the pleasure is all the Republic's, actually. It's very nice to have people who talk about transparency. Now then, Nadishani Pereira, can you tell me, why is it that Transparency International Sri Lanka is so concerned about this latest Finance Act? Why are you concerned?
Well, we understand the government's need at this point of time. There is a dire need to get foreign currency to balance this economic situation. We do understand that it is in that light, and that is the justification to introduce this Finance Act, which offers an amnesty or an overarching amnesty for those who have hidden their funds, their assets, their income without paying taxes in various locations. And what is offered is that there won't be questions asked. You can bring back that money and invest in either the treasury bills and bonds, in either the share market of a resident company, or in debt securities, or movable or immovable asset. You can invest in one of those, or if urgent, if you need a little more time for that, you can even deposit the money in an account here, and we will not prosecute you. We will not impose penalties on you for evading tax, for not paying tax. It's just a 1% tax that you have to pay, just 1% for that amount that you will bring in, and no other issues. You will be exempt from all the other provisions. So basically, the Indian Revenue Act and the Value Added Tax Act, these are being completely exempted for these parties. So the intention is that the intention really is what originally the mindset would be, those who are engaged in lawful business but somehow didn't want to pay their tax and evading will now think this is a good opportunity for us to declare these earnings, bring them here and invest it, right, in safer investments, and that they'll eventually become tax compliant. They will join the tax base, and this will have a good impact. So now, why are we concerned here? The issue is that if you look at this money, this money that is not brought to the tax base, the money that is kept in different destinations without paying tax, belong to several categories. They can be, like I said before, people who are doing ordinary businesses, which are lawful businesses, but who have evaded tax. But they can also be money that is basically black money. Money that has come out of money assets that are the result of bribery and corruption. You can't openly declare that, right? And then it can also be money that you earn by engaging in unlawful activities, such as drug trafficking, terrorist financing, child trafficking, these various completely unlawful activities. When somebody is engaged in it, you're not going to be open about what you earn from it, because then you can be tracked and prosecuted for being engaged in a criminal activity. Now, all those parties can also decide to actually abuse this law and creep through these provisions, right? Now, and then what happens? Now, it needless to say that anybody here, I understand the detrimental side of that in unlawful activities I mentioned. If we open our doors, even inadvertently here perhaps, but to these parties engaged in drug trafficking, child trafficking, etc., to easily invest inside the country and in these lawful areas, that particular business can also spread in the country, and we know how dangerous those businesses are, just from a social point of view, later on the economic point of view. Then we have if you look at corruption, and if you are allowing what we call, these are the proceeds of crime, right? Things that are earned out of crime to come in, you're just basically encouraging, you're giving them an easy way out for these proceeds to come in, and they can further in those corrupt acts. And also, which just last year, that we were taken out of the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. Right, that is the global watchdog on money laundering and terrorist financing. It's intergovernmental organization with over 200 countries, including Sri Lanka, committing to uphold the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing obligations. So now we were in a grey list. Because saying we are not fully fulfilling those requirements of countering these measures, and we were able to come out of it. Now, with the introduction of this type of far-reaching amnesty, we can again be looked upon, and they can review and assess and say your systems are again not strong enough, because now you have given this open amnesty that has this very high risk of enabling the inflow of black money. And what happens if we go?
Sorry, Shani, can I interrupt and ask you? Some of what you've said is it almost beggars belief. It's now 20 years since 9/11, and the United States has spent trillions of dollars in going after a terrorist, Osama bin Laden, and so on. Not only Osama bin Laden, but terrorism all over the world. Airline companies all over the world have had their costs go up because of the extra security and so on. And in between all this, Sri Lanka, of course, has also not been too far away from the action. We had a court case in Britain brought about by a British investigative authority, in which it was disclosed, and it is not contested, that a certain amount of money was paid to a senior official at the time serving at Sri Lankan Airlines. Now, are you telling me, Nadishani, that, for example, if this person wanted to bring that money back from, we believe that the money went to a regional nation around us, if that person and his wife were so minded to bring that money to Sri Lanka, everything will be forgiven on payment of 1%. That doesn't augur well to the honest, hardworking, dedicated, patriotic citizens of Sri Lanka who pay their taxes. My cameraman this evening, he pays his taxes. I dare say all the 4,000 direct employees of our group pay their taxes, as indeed we do. It's absolutely crazy. What possesses a public official to sit down and dream up this 1% amnesty? Surely it cannot possibly benefit over 100,000 people. It must be way down that list. What do you say, Nadishan? It is frustrating for us to ask these questions, actually.
You very well elaborated the sentiments that can have bring in a very massive negative impact through this amnesty. The sentiments of a law-abiding taxpayer. Right? Because that was that last point I was going to say. The other reason we are concerned is that this gives what you call not positive nudging, which we really have to do in terms of promoting integrity, transparency, whereas it's nudging in the negative direction, where you see that the genuine guys feel, oh, look here, like just as you said, these funds who have done, massively defrauded the country, stolen our money and hidden it and lived in luxury using such stolen money, are now able to even use this amnesty and bring in their wealth here, invest further, enjoy this with no repercussions, whereas we have to go through the same thing, and there is like nothing positive that we see out of that. And it can actually discourage the genuine taxpayer, and it might even make one think, because in our country we've had over 10 amnesties, and one might think, I might as well keep hiding my money because, in another couple of years they'll have another amnesty. At that time I can bring it in and I have a better deal. You're giving that negative image. Now, one thing I must note is that the Act specifically says that nothing in this Act will stop investigations and actions, investigations and court cases that are filed under the Money Laundering Act, Bribery Act, Terrorist Suppression of Terrorist Financing Convention Act, Narcotics Act, right? The idea is not to, the original idea is not to welcome black money, the stated written idea. What I'm trying to say is it can easily be abused unless there are few things which even the Financial Action Task Force recommends. If a country thinks that it has to use this mechanism called a tax amnesty or a voluntary tax declaration scheme to address some of its immediate economic woes. Those are some of the recommendations we actually published through our press release a couple of days back. If I may explain those, some of the.
Yes, we'll be shortly going into a break, after which we'll discuss the detail, if you like. But I have had over the past fortnight, we've had several messages from members of the public, our viewing public, who are true and good and blue citizens of this country, and who are proud to pay their taxes, who are proud to stand in a line and vote for the person who appears to be the best on the list, and so on. And it's rather a letdown when this government, especially this government, have their stated aim, their primary statement before the election was about security. And we had this awful terrorism attacks at Easter and so on. And those investigations revealed vast sums of monies that had become available to these people, to these terrorists. They may not have been tried by a court of law just yet, but they killed themselves, and we know what they did. So why is it, do you think, that the Republic forgets these finer points when it comes to an election? Because I don't see the collective opposition expressing, they express disdain. But I would personally, as a citizen of this country, I would like an unequivocal statement from the collective opposition that when they come into power, rather than if, when they come into power, that they will re-look at this entire amnesty, because it doesn't sound right. What do you say, Nadishani? Should we collectively go to court?
It's now too late to go to court. As we know, our constitution does not provide for judicial review of existing legislation. We only have a limited provision where a law at the stage of a bill, when it's gazetted, and that also we have like 7 days, where the citizens can go and challenge the bill, and that was done. And at that point, what the Supreme Court can do is to see whether the bill is in violation of the Constitution. And the parties who went to court asserted that the fundamental right, especially the right to equality, is being violated by this particular bill. However, the court cited some decisions by the previous benches as well to say that, well, the Supreme Court in previous occasions have held that we understand the reasons why this is imposed. You cannot consider this as a violation of equality. So, but of course, the Attorney General at that point vouched to make certain changes to the bill as it came, the first version. And based on those changes as well, the Supreme Court gave the okay to this.
Sorry, Nadishani, on that note, let's go for a break and take a quick peek at this evening's primetime news from the News First team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. I'm in conversation with Nadishani Pereira from Transparency International Sri Lanka. Now then, TISL, Nadishani, recently made some recommendations that this government ought to be following, because now the Amnesty Act is now law. Can you elaborate? What are these recommendations?
Yes, and these recommendations are in line with the specific recommendations for tax amnesty given by the Financial Action Task Force. So the first one, critical one, is that the relevant institutions need to ensure that the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing mechanism, the preventive part of it, is definitely followed to the word. Now, what this means is that usually, if you take the central bank and then their financial investigation unit, they provide specific guidelines to all the financial institutions, all the banks with whom these parties will deposit money and assets. They give instructions as to how to identify a suspicious transaction, how to ensure due diligence, basically, how to then get more information, how to unravel beneficial ownership. That means how to figure out the sources from where this money is coming, and then if there's a company, who are the ultimate owners? Very important. Where is it coming from? If it's coming from a nation, from a country or a destination that is known to have very lax measures, laws in place with regard to countering money laundering, if they are like safe havens, tax havens, if the money is coming from such place, then our banks are advised to exert extra scrutiny, because you know that this can potentially be problematic. There are all these measures. Now, that is how they try and track suspicious transaction and this black money. And then if there is actual evidence, then they report it to the CID, FIB, wherever, and then there are with other necessary parties that has to be tracked. Now, if you look at a very practical situation for us, when there is this law, there will be an influx of funds, foreign money coming into the country to use this particular opening now. And if you look at who are the ones who are finally dealing with this, the bank employees who are like overloaded with transactions, you are asking these guys to do all of that. So this is why sometimes this is why we are emphasizing on this recommendation, it's all about implementation now. Okay, now we have the law. It's all about implementation. You have to make it realistic for these people to actually exercise due diligence. You need a proper data management system introduced, these mechanisms, to raise that red flag. The second very important recommendation is to ensure domestic coordination between these relevant institutions. Now, we have a massive problem in this country with regard to coordination between state agencies. We try to operate in silos, and therefore, the real needy people who should get the benefit often fall through the net. So now, if this happens here, if the relevant institutions, what I mentioned before, like FIU, Central Bank, financial institutions, CID, these parties, then the Internal Revenue Department, if they they do not work together, coordinate, have systems, have access to that databases such as the database of politically exposed persons, etc., then this is not going to be practical. Tracking black money is not going to be practical if there is no good coordination. And this all can be spearheaded and guided and led by the central bank. Through the FIU. And the third one is we can do all this, but there's another another stakeholder that we definitely need. That is the international entities, the banks, the banks and financial institutions and other investigative authorities in other locations from where the money is coming. Because they also have their mechanisms of bringing the alarm. Now we have to coordinate with them. We have to have mechanisms. This is why TISL has been continuously advocating, for example, that we need to bring a proper comprehensive law on proceeds of crime, where we have a asset management system also for repatriated assets. Say you were referring to a particular massive case of bribery. Say we apprehend and say we want to get that money back to Sri Lanka so that it actually can be given to the victims of this kind of corruption. When we get the money, we need an institutional framework to manage those assets and liquidate and, take those actions. So we need that whole mechanism. And our third recommendation in here is that we definitely need international cooperation, and we had to ensure that without these 3 points, we are facing a massive risk that this law can be abused. And we can get into another grade list. And the good investors, the genuine ones whom we are like really wanting to attract now, right, to Sri Lanka right now, dire needy, not want good investors, they might think twice, right? Nobody wants to go to a country where it's known to have, not have good financial system, known to be having black money as a place that is, you can be labeled as a problematic agency because you are having trading with Sri Lanka. You don't want to get into that situation. So that is one thing. Of course, the other point about how the citizens feel, that is a problem that will persist.
Would it help the way the citizens feel if there was a list published regularly, a sort of a league list of those companies that have paid their taxes, at least if we can start with the corporates, so that it's very public information, and anybody wanting to find out if this company A, B or C, especially if it's a listed entity, they should, and these figures are available anyway. But if somebody were to compile this all, somebody in government, in authority, and put out, it's almost a name and shame list, really, because some companies make enormous profits, but when you look at the dividends and the amount of tax paid to the state, it is sadly minuscule. So do you think that it's a good idea if upstanding citizens of this country collected and collated this information and put it out for everyone to see?
I think it's a very good idea, Faraz. And also, this is a country that has the right to information enshrined in our constitution now. It is definitely a right for the general public to know whether these, especially in terms of the accountability of the private sector, who are the ones who are abiding by the laws, and like you say, even if you could publish the ones who are actually paying, then it's obvious about the ones who are not paying. So you don't have to necessarily name and shame somebody. It automatically happens. We do know we have a massive informal sector, and which has big massive earnings, but are not coming within this tax system. It's a topic for the economics more to say, but I would definitely agree that when people have this type of information, that in a way will also signal to the private sector about their transparency accountability. In fact, I would say, in line with the RTI, a private entity, especially listed companies, they don't have to even wait till somebody puts this list. They need to proactively disclose this information. It should be on their websites. And we have many organizations who actually are such good corporate citizen with social responsibility. So I think they can set the standard and be an example to others, because when it comes to corruption, there is always several, there is just not just one party. There are the gatekeepers who enable the flow of dirty money, from accountants to lawyers, and then to financial institutions. They are, without them, a corrupt person cannot do the money laundering. There is an entire network. So if you come to private sector and the public sector, when it comes to bribery, there's a party that gives and there's a party that takes. So all of them need to, when you talk about accountability, we need to talk about all the sectors.
My granny used to say that it takes two hands to clap, because you can't clap with the one hand, you know, can you? So I get your point about corruption, but what do you think, Nadishani, how much do you think Sri Lanka hopes to attract between now and the 31st of December, when this amnesty runs out? Have you guys at TSL hazarded a guess as to how much we may actually make, and make the new governor of the central bank happy because he'll get more dollars in, or euros, or whatever?
Well, that's a difficult one to quantify, how much money can come, and especially if we are thinking of the black money as well. But of course, it is known that when these kind of amnesties are offered, there is an influx. There is an influx. There are the businesses that would like to use the opportunity to bring in their money. There would be an influx. But I would like to mention at this point, this Tax Justice Network, an organization that is very much looking into all these aspects around the world. Their conclusion, observing tax amnesties around the world, is that more than the benefit, which is very short term, yes, you get a flow of funds. You might address your immediate cash flow needs, foreign currency needs, but the negative impact, it stays on. That message that you give to the genuine taxpayer, that stays on, and that in the long run can discourage compliance. So I think 2003 amnesty that we gave is considered so far to be one of the most well successful, if you may say, in terms of getting a cash flow. At that point, 26 statues were exempted. So we are yet to see what will happen now. But we earnestly appeal to the government not to think about the wider implications and take those precautions very seriously to protect our country from becoming a safe haven for the black money. In terms of people, I would say let's not be discouraged, because at the end of the day, this is a democracy, and also, like I say, we have the right to information. We should not we should not underestimate our power as citizens. I think we need to keep our eyes open. We need to ask questions. We need to demand information. We need to demand transparency. If it's about COVID funds, if it's about a development project, we need to ask information about, okay, so what is the inflow, what is the fund you got, what is the work you're doing, what's the procurement process, show us the tender procedure, and so forth. And the more the people are also asking this question, and it is happening, especially for the smaller programs around the village, people are using the RTI, and it has a transformative effect. Even without, you can be vigilant, you can ask this from your representatives, and there would be some pressure on the relevant parties then, including the businesses, to abide by these standards.
And on that note, as we end, perhaps the plantation workers also should be asking their unions what they are doing with the 5 rupees per day that they collect. And these unfortunate people, most of them, continue to live 2 or 3 generations in the same lined room. Narishani Pereira from Transparency International Sri Lanka, thank you very much for your time on Newsline Zoom. And it's now time for the primetime news from News First. Take care, and as always, God bless you.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.